In an era where AI and technology are rapidly advancing, how can B2B tech companies maintain the essential human element in their business relationships and innovation processes, ensuring they add value beyond what technology alone can offer? And I believe that's an important question given the many challenges that businesses face, and having the right kind of culture to support initiatives, a tendency of people to resist change, while balancing the need for better outcomes for customers and the organization as a whole. It's also a question I'm hoping to put to our guest in order to gain some insights, we'll explore that in a bit. But first, hello and welcome to the Predictable B2B Success podcast. I'm Vinay Koshy, and our guest is Will Adams. Will, you're the president at Tarkenton, an experienced business executive. You also serve as on the board of directors of Billfold, and you are the principal of Tarkenton Private Capital. Now, I believe in these capacities, you really help identify and nurture promising new business leaders and innovation, guiding them towards sustainable growth. You're also the co-founder of a thriving software as a service enterprise catering to small museums and family offices across North America. Another interesting point from people I'm sure will be that you also serve as a board member of the Atlanta Children's Foundation, which links individuals, organizations, and resources to address the needs of children in foster care. Very interesting. But first off, Will, could you describe for us what Tarkenton actually does?
Sure. First off, Dave, thanks for having me, and thanks for that introduction. So Tarkenton, we are a B2B development operation. So we work with a lot of companies that span the spectrum of Fortune 500 to early stage startups and everything in between. And when I say B2B business development firm, we traditionally have operated as a skunk works, if you will. So a lot of companies, especially high profile companies, will bring us in anytime they have a market opportunity. Maybe it's a business opportunity within the company itself. And we come in, we identify the opportunity that they have. We start to search, design, prototyping. We'll go out with an MVP. If it shows promise, we'll continue. We'll go to market and take it from there. And at that point, the company will bring it within, embrace it, promote it. If we get to the MVP and maybe it's not working out, maybe the signs aren't there, it goes away and it never existed. No harm, no foul. Quite interesting. We learn a lot. We get to work with a lot of really interesting companies and industries that way. We also do a lot with software as a service as well. So we create a lot of very interesting tools that predominantly serve the B2B space as well. And another foray that we like to play in is B2B marketing as well. So something you are obviously a strong proponent in is storytelling. So we believe that B2B is one of the most challenging sales processes because it's typically something that requires a very long relationship, a very long sales cycle, where you have to win the confidence of the buyer, and winning the confidence of a buyer typically involves telling great stories. So those are the three things that we like to have fun with today.
Sure. It's a bit of an unusual business model. I'm curious, was there a particular event or incident that triggered this journey into creating Tarkenton to what it is today?
So how did all of this come about?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think for us, I would describe us as a very opportunistic firm, very entrepreneurial. We are driven by all throughout our office space and our office environment here, we are driven by one very clear, very simple mission. And it's plastered all over our walls. And it's not just a rallying cry that looks really good, imprinted on the wall. It's something that we hire to. It's something that is very much part of our ethos as people, which is the mission of business is to help people, period. And so in helping people, there's lots of different ways that you can help people. And I think that's at the heart of every entrepreneurial story. Every entrepreneurial story always starts with an opportunity or a problem that someone has seen in the marketplace. Oftentimes it's a very personal problem or opportunity that someone saw. I know when you and I spoke previously, you talked about the impetus for Sproutworth and, the origin story behind that. And that's how we look at the marketplace. And it's a very opportunistic way of tackling the market. And quite frankly, it's very fun. We believe that business should also be fun. So that's the way that we view the world.
Certainly. So with the question that I started with with the introduction, and I'll repeat that, in an era where AI and technology are rapidly advancing, how can B2B tech companies maintain the essential human element in their business relationships and innovation processes, ensuring they add value beyond what technology can offer? Would you say that culture, which you seem to have really embodied and used to drive the company, would you say that's a key element, and other elements that you would recommend we consider?
Vinay, that's a really big question. I think it's a big question that that probably most of the folks that are tuning into this are wrestling with. I think it's a question that I think society as a whole is really grappling with. I think it's probably the biggest question that we have to answer. And I don't think it's a very simple one to answer. I think how it's answered is really going to define, the direction of humanity itself.
Mm.
I think obviously there's some inherent dangers in how we go about answering the intersection of human experience versus tech advancements. I think some of the concerns that I personally have, and I think there's some commonalities I think that are shared by others, is racing too heavily and too quickly into technology advancements at the expense of that human experience. I think, puts that human experience at danger. I always think back to the Netflix documentary that stirred up a lot of this debate, and I think in a very healthy way, The Social Dilemma. I don't know if you've seen this or not, but I remember I think it was a former Google employee had talked about the negative impact of the intentional psychological way that the technology is designed and the negative byproduct that it has on especially young people. I'm a father of two young daughters who are definitely in that demographic, who are engaging with this, rapidly advancing technology, and are right there in that sweet spot that this person was speaking of, in that 10 to 14-year-old range. And just last year, I think it was over the summer, here in the States, the CDC came out with I think it was a youth risk survey, and they had said that I think it was 3 out of 5 teen girls had expressed a 30%, I think it was 30% out of that group had expressed thoughts of suicide. And I think it was the highest rate on record. There are, within that study, as you go through and you start drilling down, there's a direct correlation to the technology that they're interacting with. And as much as some of this technology is about connectivity, it also creates a certain level of isolation at the same time. And so, which begs the question, where does that responsibility lie? Does it lie on the consumer, on the user end? Certainly there's some, but does it also lie on the creator side, on the company side? And I think that's going back to that documentary, right? That's the dilemma that I think we're grappling with. I think that's your question. It's human experience or the technology experience. I think another one, I don't know if you read the book Sapiens.
No, I haven't.
Read this one. I would recommend it as well. It's a fabulous book. I think it's an Israeli professor had written this. He also did a follow-up that I have not read quite yet. But he talks about the evolutionary forces of Homo sapiens, and talks about, the past few hundred years, just the speed in which technology has advanced, and the belief that artificial intelligence at some point will potentially surpass human intelligence. But the interesting thing that has always hung in my head since I read that book several years ago, that makes a lot of sense, is over time, we have been able to biologically keep up and evolve with the technology around us. But the rate at which technology has advanced biologically, evolutionarily, we have not been able to keep up with it. So, which is also a very interesting, an interesting thing to really think about. So the answer, I think what you're driving at, where is that intersection? I think we have to look first and foremost within as companies and what our responsibility is and how we approach the design and what our responsibility is at the end of the day to the end users. So I think first and foremost, the transparency in which we design and what's driving the design. I think there has to be some ethical guidelines, and as a free market thinker and business person, sometimes it pains me to say this, but I do believe we are in a Wild West moment right now, and there needs to be some guardrails in place, ethical guidelines and some regulations. And there's definitely some conversation, but I think that needs to be under strong consideration as well.
I'd love to explore some elements around that in a bit, but I'm also curious, given your journey to date, what would you say is your personal area of strength?
In terms of, I'm sorry, I missed the first part, Vinay.
Sure. Given your journey to date, what would you say is your personal area of strength?
Just as in business in general?
Personally, related to business, but yeah.
Really good question, Vinay. I think it's just probably related back to that question. I think it's just connectivity to people. I think you heard a little bit when you introduced the things. I care very deeply about the human experience and the people that we get to experience life with on this rock that we walk on. I think the longer we live, the smaller this world becomes. I think technology obviously plays a part in that, but I think it's definitely the human connection and whatever you want to call it, being a people person, whatever it may be, but strong level of empathy, I think, and just trying to put as much good into the world as possible.
Right. And in that area of strength, what would you say is something that businesses don't know, but should?
Don't know, but should. You're really good at this, Vinay. You're really good questions, very deep. I think areas of empathy, and I think it's a really good theme as an underbed to user design, as we talk about technology, as we talk about UX, we talk about, when we're approaching, research and design, it comes back to that human experience and what drives a delightful, memorable, remarkable experience in anything in our lives. If you really think about it, it's something that is so visceral in such a real way, and it's typically driven by some form of empathy, something that just really grabs your soul. And I think too many times we view things in such a transactional fashion. Even the questions that you get at the end of an experience with the company, it's so transactional related. It's really not connecting into the why of I came to you to do business with you. It's more related to what just happened or the transaction of the experience versus the experience itself.
Certainly. You make a great point. There's a lot of talk around using AI. On one hand, you've got conversations around AI taking jobs away, etc. But at the very least, I believe most businesses are concerned with productivity gains and the actual implementation of AI. With this desire to improve outcomes for people, be they within the organization or as customers, is there a lens or a framework that you use to find the most optimal way of introducing into your business processes?
Yes, I think it's a question that we're still trying to answer. Be fully transparent with you. We have our engineering team. We have in our Slack channel currently AI channel, and every morning like clockwork, usually from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m., that channel is lighting up
Mhm.
with articles, videos, links to different AI tools that are popping up on the market, and then great dialogue that comes in after it. And I think right now, one of the things that I think we are struggling with, I think that's a fair assessment, is there's a lot of noise right now in this
Mhm.
space. There's a lot of, and with a lot of noise, there's a lot of, I think we have to be careful of where we're going to make the investment, where we're going to make the commit, who we're going to partner with, which AI is real,
Mhm.
defensible. It's funny, the past 6 months, in some form or fashion, I've had the opportunity to see or be a part of over 800 pitches from early stage startups. And the one commonality in almost all of them,
Mhm.
there was in every single presentation, every single pitch, there was some form of AI, powered by AI.
Mhm.
And, you know, it's come on, man. Come on. Like just because, ran something through an AI bot or you wrote an article with AI doesn't mean that your software solution has some type of defensible AI that is, really doing something. And that's what I mean in terms of the struggle of making the call on how we're going to embody that. And I think it's a conversation I was just having this morning. Just watching the market, I find it very interesting. If you've observed Apple, it's been very interesting to me how quiet, relatively quiet,
Mhm.
that Apple has been on this front. And and I think it's been very intentional. Everything that they do is very intentional. And I think they've been very smart in and if you look at what the disaster, and I think they've acknowledged it as a disaster of what Google just went through,
Mhm.
where they had to, put their tail between their legs and go before the American government and take a lashing at the disastrous rollout of their AI and have to walk all of that back. That's something that, with our partners and clients that we're cognizant of. And sometimes I think there's an arms race to be first to market.
Mhm.
Sometimes I don't know if that's the best strategy. Sometimes let's let the dust settle. Let's let some other people make those expensive mistakes. And then let's come in and with a wiser investment and then go from there. So I think that's where we're at right now, Vinay.
Mhm. So a lot to consider given all that's happening in our world. I'm curious, given the way you described Tarkenton, is there an instance that you could share with us where you found integrating technology significantly enhanced the customer experience, especially in light of empathy?
Technology and empathy. I have to say, so we have I would probably say two different functions. So I mentioned previously, software as a service. We have a variety of applications that we've developed over the years. And this is interesting, going back to the AI question. So one of those is I would not call it a through and through software as a service because there is a real life human element to it. So small to mid-sized business owners, oftentimes it is a lonely, scary place to be sometimes. And we understand that because many of us in our organization have lived that life. And years ago, we created a business consultation application to where a business owner can, through an app, through a desktop, can engage a business consultant, but before they do so, they can go in and go through and review previous questions by other business owners in various topics of business. Sometimes they can gain insights before they go and ask a question to better frame it. Maybe they can go ahead and get that question addressed. Uh, if not, they can go ahead and submit that question. It then comes into our intake. We just recently gave the business owner the option to use AI as an option, full disclosure up front, to go ahead and submit and to frame the question. If you want a real life experienced business operator to review this information that AI provided to you, click this button and it's going to go to a real life business operator that's going to review it and provide additional context. Or you can just drop your question off here for a real life business operator who is then going to respond directly back to you. And then within that, it comes into our team here. We have real life full-time employee business operators that we have a database with hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of interactions with business owners. In our own database that we have layered in AI to where we can quickly search previously researched questions to really accelerate the research process in providing a response back to that individual. Then we can build on the research to make sure it's the most current response possible. Then we can return that back to that business owner. And in that process, that is a really good blend between software as a service, a little bit injection of AI. However, a real life human element is always introduced because, especially today with where we're at with AI, there is definitely not a soul embedded into that response. So having someone on the other end of that has lived and breathed that experience, that is absolutely conveyed in the response going back to that individual.
That's a wonderful example. How do you unpack the needs in order to create that kind of experience that resonates well with customers and the organization as well? And most people, of course, go through, or most companies, I would say, go through something of a discovery process where there's a lot of questions being asked. What's your take on what that process should look like, at least from a Tarkenton's perspective?
So we are huge believers in journey mapping, huge believers. So we have a very strong research team as part of Tarkenton. Every engagement, whether it's for a partner, a client, or if it's anything that we initiate internally on behalf of the company itself, first and foremost, always starts with research. I think a big mistake that many companies can make, and to be fully transparent, I think historically and in our previous life as a company, I think it's a mistake that we have made as well, which is convincing ourselves that we are the end user and we know best. So skipping those fundamental early stage steps and just jumping right into a project plan. So the discipline that we have created, everything starts research and design. And when I say design, I'm really talking about a journey map. So we first start with research, and research is going to be working with all the various internal and external stakeholders, gathering different information from them. Then it's going to be looking at all of the different intersections of whether it's technology, workflows, work streams, of where those are intersecting with the different stakeholders or actors, whatever you want to call them. And then we are going to plot all of that out on a journey map to understand exactly what that flow looks like, where are the dependencies across that entire experience. Then we produce that on a digital file. We also produce it on a very large, tangible printout that gets physically tacked to a wall. And then what that does is it diffuses arguments. But what it also does is, most importantly, when organizations change leadership, change project managers, it provides a single source of truth. So anytime there is an opinion about why do we need this thing in this process? That makes no sense. And such, you remove, that's unnecessary. Time out. Let's go back to the map. If we remove this pin from this process, look at all the things downstream that it's going to topple. So I think that's the key for how we go about solidifying that experience.
I'm also curious, what strategies have you found effective in fostering innovation within large risk-averse organizations?
Ooh, you're getting into one of my favorites here. So going back to, I think, one of your first questions about where I talked about skunk works. Mm-hmm. Skunk works, for folks not familiar with that term, it's basically when we are a stealth organization that is brought in to go and tackle a top secret project on behalf of a company. The project is a wild success, then that company takes all the glory, all the credit, which we are elated with because we did our job. If it does not work, we learn, the company learns, but it never existed, so all good. What we have learned, and we have learned a lot, the most self-aware companies, and I say self-aware, they're the ones that call us. And they call us because they're self-aware, because they realize they are bureaucratic, they are risk adverse, like you said, they are slow, and I would say not or, and, because this is the one common thread in all of it. They are, their shareholders, their stakeholders are invested in that company because that company produces predictable outcomes, because that company has developed over time processes that produce predictable outcomes. So when that company recognizes that the market's changing, the competitors rising up and starting to nip around the edges, and they need to do something about it, but now they have this dilemma. If I go and try to change, let's just call it an assembly line that is a well-oiled machine, I've hired people for specific jobs on that line. If I come in and try to introduce something that is different, maybe just a degree different, it's going to create chaos within my organization. And now it's going to disrupt the outcomes that my shareholders and stakeholders are expecting. Now my house is going to crumble. So I can't do that. So the self-aware are going to say, I need to do something alongside, and I need to perfect that, and I need to work it over here. And then I've got to find a way to bridge it into this organization in a very methodical way to build this kind of adjacent assembly line to start cranking it up to then go do the same thing. Where I think a lot of organizations fail in that regard of trying to be innovators inside an incumbent company, is believing that they can be disruptive inside an incumbent driven organization on their own. So if you think about it, the reward system, the culture, the how performance is incentivized, is managed, the recruiting process, the hiring process, everything is geared towards keeping the main thing. So the resistance that we have personally been met with sometimes when we are like, think about an airplane and getting dropped in to the lion's den, it literally feels like you're being dropped into a lion's den, because those people are going to fight you tooth and nail to defend their fiefdom of what they believe it is, right? So I think the big thing for us is always coaching and imploring on our partners, give us the guardrails, give us the budget, make sure that you give us the bridge builder. That's the biggest thing. Don't put us over here on an island all by ourselves without any bridge builders back into your company. Because if we go and build this great thing and then we show up 6 months, a year later and say, hey, this works, here you go, and then they try to take it into the organization, it's not going to work. You have to have a bridge builder between the organization and this external team. We got to have that bridge builder. If we have those three pieces, guardrail, budget, bridge builder, that's when it works.
So in that same vein, and with this idea of bridge builder, are you suggesting that there are champions from across the organization that work with you in order to develop these solutions?
Correct, absolutely. And those champions are going to be, and that's where it's going to take again, going back to the journey mapping and the road mapping for this, part of that journey map exercise starts up front with the research. It's who are those champions, and it's going to be different in different organizations. Depending on what the ask is, what kind of innovation that you're being asked to innovate, that champion could look very different. So again, part of it's not, hey, here's this thing we want to go do, and then we go off and huddle up over here and then come back and say, all right, it's, give us someone. No, it's let us go ask a lot of questions internally across a lot of different teams and team leads inside this organization. And we will uncover, lots of times you're going to have insurgents inside an incumbent organization. Sometimes these insurgents sit inside very influential positions inside a company, and they're just waiting for that time, for that opportunity to just, rip this thing off and fly that, that insurgency, that revolutionary flag. So those are the ones that we want to find as part of that research process, and then just let them go and fly that flag proud.
Thinking along such lines, I'm assuming that leadership is particularly important. So, in your opinion, what qualities do you think are essential for leaders navigating their companies through rapid technology changes like we're seeing today?
I think communication, number one, first and foremost. I think any and every problem, crisis that happens can always be peeled back, and the root is communication. Miscommunication, misinterpretation, lack of communication, no communication, some form of a communication issue is always at the core. So first and foremost, a very clear, thoughtful, articulate communicator, number one. I think number two is a team builder. So someone that is very proficient in identifying talent, and then not only identifying, but then putting that talent in positions to where they can win. Three, with that talent is creating a culture of empowerment. And I think that's one of the biggest threads that I think we do really well here at Tarkenton is if more leaders would be honest with themselves, they would understand that themselves personally. And if the folks, listening to this, watching this, would just ask themselves the question, just in the past month, how many business conversations, how many initiatives, projects have you taken on that did not work? And I keep a folder in my email for things that did not work. And, think about baseball, right? Somebody that hits 400, so 4 out of 10 at bats, they get on base. that is considered the best of the best. In business, if you're hitting 4 out of 10 on deals, oh my goodness, you would be a superstar. It's not that
Mhm.
easy, man. So why do we put so much pressure on our people to believe that everything they're going to touch, they're going to get it right? It's just not true. It's not going to happen. That's not the way life works.
Mhm.
So empowering people to experiment, to fail, just as long as they are learning quickly from that failure, that they are not hiding from it or keeping it from others. But that empowerment piece, man, that is the biggest thing that I think a leader, especially in technology, has to have in a leadership capacity.
Interesting. I completely resonate with this idea of communication. Is there perhaps a key aspect of being able to communicate that you find serves better leaders better than others?
Questions.
Right.
Ask lots of questions. Ask lots of questions. I think, the more, so many times I believe that because of a title or a position that a leader
Mhm.
holds, there is unfortunately an unspoken belief that a team is waiting or looking to that leader to speak or to initiate or to engage, but it's not the other way around.
Mhm.
So I think for a leader to create a habit or a routine, it goes back to the great Sam Walton of Walmart, who, by all accounts, if not created it, he's the one that popularized the manage by walking around. So his whole, every time he did a store visit, he made famous by walking the store.
Mhm.
And he wouldn't go and spend his time with the store manager. He went and spent his time on the floor with the associates, and he asked questions. And the amount of learning that happened that way, and the amount of going back to empowerment, he put the power in the hands of the associates to
Mhm.
engage upward. So it empowers the team, but it informs the leader. And I think that's a communication style that is so powerful for both parties.
Mhm. How would you mentor someone to develop that level of expertise and empathy, as you put it?
I think it's, obviously lead by example would be first and foremost. I
Mhm.
think, yeah, that's a hard one. I think it really has to be driven by a genuine, heartfelt curiosity and
Mhm.
desire to really care and understand what is going on in someone's life and understanding. So I think from a mentorship perspective, it's, if that might be missing from
Mhm.
someone's personality, let's say, for whatever reason, I think it's maybe putting it in terms that maybe they can understand. So if a person might be a little bit more self-centered, or maybe just into their own bubble
Mhm.
or their own kind of tribe, if you will, maybe it's putting it into those terms of, the saying of, if the shoe was on the other foot, so it's asking the questions, if this were you, so doing it in reverse maybe. But I really believe, and that's from a hiring perspective and culture building, I really believe that that has to start in the recruitment and the hiring process, quite frankly,
Mhm.
because I think it's, you know, you can't really, I think you can change people's heart for curiosity and empathy. I think you
Mhm.
can get there, but the speed at which business moves and the speed in which you need to lead, I really believe you have to find somebody that's already there and hire them in.
Right. Great insight there. And as businesses scale, uh, I'm curious, given the amount of conversation that we're having around personalization, etc., how would you recommend we maintain personal touch that distinguishes the experiences we create for our customers over that of others?
So personal touch within what context would you say?
Primarily with our customers, but also perhaps within the organization.
So I think one thing, I'll give an example, maybe what you're looking for. Years ago, my career started out of college. My professional career, I'd say, out of college was in retail.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember at the time, one of my early mentors had said, he was talking about job security was the context, and he said, the closer you are to the customer, the more secure your job is. You know, the company at the time was going through some executive reorgs and layoffs and stuff. It was just a passing comment. It wasn't even a sit down. It was just a passing comment that always hung in my brain. So as I came into Tarkenton and observing other technology companies and how siloed, and it's not even how big an organization is. Small companies are siloed too. One thing I always found interesting is how your client success, client service, support, whatever name you want to put on it, how separated they are from your development teams are off developing and they're clustered together on a different floor, a different office, a different country in some cases. And your service team, same thing. You start thinking about how far removed the people that are creating this technology that an end user is going to be experiencing, interacting with. Like it just seems so removed. Coming back to this experience and the touch and the empathy and this user experience. So one of we did two things very intentionally that we still do today. Every engineer or developer that we hire into the organization, part of their onboarding into the organization, they have a rotation that goes through our client success organization. So they have to go through, they have to answer phones, they have to talk to the customer, they have to talk to our partners, and it's very enjoyable because they're sweating bullets when they're on that live fire exercise, and they get it. They understand what it feels like when you have someone that is not having a good experience, or a developer thinks very differently than someone that is tech adverse. And to have to be on the receiving end really makes a profound difference in the way that people think about that. So that's the first thing. The second thing that we do is we place the teams that are assigned to the product from a tech development, maintenance, improvement standpoint. They are centered or placed inside a client success hub. So they are not separated, but they are inside that hub. So what happens is organically, they hear, they see these interactions, these conversations go on all day within earshot. And then they have conversations with their colleagues about that call I just had or about that chat I just got off of. They're also in those channels, in the Slack channels, in the chat channels. So they're seeing the live fire all day long. And going back to the empathy and understanding that client experience, we believe we create better software and better experiences because the people that create it are closer to the customer than most other software organizations that we encounter.
I'm sure there's lots we could dive into. I'm just conscious of time. But is there perhaps, with this idea of ensuring that we add value beyond what technology alone can offer, is there perhaps a couple of aspects that you find do not get much airtime? If so, what would they be?
Aspects, airtime, give you a little more context.
Just a couple of perhaps key areas that you find doesn't get talked about very much, especially in leadership circles within companies. If so, what would they be?
I love your questions. Really good questions. Really good. Yeah. I don't know. It's like you are who you hang out with. And I'd say the people that I don't hang out with, the people that I may encounter in a proposal or at an event, a conference that I don't want to do business with, I think are, again, going back to some of the conversation we were having before about people that view the landscape in a very transactional way.
Mm-hmm.
Again, going back to our belief system that the mission of business is to help people, period. We truly believe that if our focus is that, and it's always that, and it's always driven from that ethos, that profitability, revenue, it will follow. We believe that when people or organizations start from the premise of money, that's when things get off kilter. I think if you look at Wells Fargo as an amazing example, not once, but twice in recent memory, when everything was driven around sales quotas. Not saying quotas are bad. We have goals, we have performance metrics, we have accountability built into our system. You have to have accountability, you have to have guardrails, but I think the theme kind of this conversation that we've had today, I think keeps coming back to not losing sight of, at the end of the day, man, what really matters in life. It's the old adage, you can't take your money with you at the end of the day. And I can make an argument, I think there is an argument being made that companies that are not just giving lip service, because there's a lot of that happening, companies that are truly making a meaningful difference, either at a local level or broader, in the type of impact that they're having, is good business. So I think maybe that's one thing that maybe isn't taken seriously enough or talked about enough, is starting from a position. And again, going back to those 800 or so startup pitches, right? Everything was about how much money you were going to make and what the exit's going to be. And I understand you're pitching to a room of investors and they want to know what the return on the investment's going to be. But at the same time, it's truly, at the end of the day, what really motivates us when we go home and we see our kids or we see our loved ones, you want to feel good, you want to do good. And I really do believe if you peel it back, that is more true for more people than we give ourselves credit for.
Great point. To wrap up, Will, if you were listening to this episode, what would you say would be your top takeaway?
I think look at doing business a little bit differently. Don't follow the herd. We talked about AI. Everybody talks about first mover advantage. That is definitely true in a lot of cases, but not always. And I think if you go to Tarkenton.com, one of is different is the difference. And we truly believe that different is the difference. And lots of times it's everybody can find themselves knowingly or unknowingly in this herd mentality. So I think the biggest takeaway would be, what are you doing to be different in a sincere way? Not just lip service, not just a slogan, but at your core, at the ethos of your company, what truly makes you different.
Certainly. Listeners are curious, want to find out more or connect with you. Where would you recommend they head to?
Tarkenton.com is a great place. We have a newsletter that folks can sign up for. We do a lot of great writing, a lot of sharing of insights. You can see a lot of our work, a lot of the different partners we work with. That's a great place. And then for me personally, LinkedIn is a great place to engage with. And I would love to connect with anyone that follows your great work.
Terrific. We'll include links to that in the show notes. This has been brilliant. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.